Are you committed to releasing the full video?
Didn't I just tell you that?
You said that it was
You're
up
the
to
most
Secretary Hicks.
obnoxious reporter in the whole place. Let me just tell you, you are an obnoxious, actually a terrible reporter. And it's always the same thing with you. I told you, whatever Pete Hegseth wants to do is okay with me.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Tracking Trump on DeKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. On the show this week, we're looking at Donald Trump's rather complicated relationship with the mainstream media in the United States. Now, it's no secret that ever since his first term as president, Mr. Trump hasn't had a very good relationship with traditional news outlets like the news networks, ABC News, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, amongst others. But in his second term as president, what's really stood out, especially in the last couple of months, has been his rather escalated personal attacks against women reporters who've asked him questions on a range of issues that concern him, that concern the United States. And he's used language like Miss Piggy, ugly, stupid, incapable, amongst a whole host of name calling that he's done. Now, the Republicans say, in fact, even the White House press secretary has defended his words, essentially saying that he has been dealing with a media that's been biased against him. And this is his way of being frank and open, as they put it. But there are others who see this as a worrying pattern, which has bigger implications for the role of a free press in a democracy. It also says a lot about Mr. Trump's worldview of women, which we know has been somewhat on a weak wicket, to put it politely. Joining us on the program today to look at this issue much more closely is David Cay Johnston. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist and the author of The Making of Donald Trump. He's also now a professor of law, journalism, and public policy and joins us from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston, for joining us. Alex Zidane is a political strategist, a Republican. He's joining us from New Jersey. Thank you very much, Mr. Zidane, for being with us. I wanted to begin with you, Mr. Johnston, on this. What do you think is the reason that Mr. Trump seems to be, particularly aggressive when it comes to his responses to women reporters, and more so in the last couple of months?
Well, Donald has always had interesting relations with the press. His whole dealing with the press has always been to try to get the best he can. He's very, very good at that. I admire his skill at doing this, but he has a very hard time dealing with women who challenge him. Barbara Rez, who was basically his overseer for his construction projects, has talked about this, as have other women. And Donald, just because of his unusual and very difficult upbringing, has a hard time with women who challenge him. And so that's partly what you're seeing. We watched a reporter the other day in the White House ask him a perfectly reasonable question. He said, "I never said that." And she came back and said, "Yes, you did." And he, of course, he did. And he lost it at that point. And also playing into this, Anita, is, I believe, what's happening to him as he ages. Donald is not aging particularly well. You can see it in both his motor skills, where the way he crosses his legs and walks off, and several physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, and others who study body and motor function have talked about how this is a sign that there's something a little bit amiss in his brain. So given his predisposition to have difficulty with women who challenge him, combined with whatever's going on in his mind, it leads to him being more volatile in those kinds of encounters.
Alex Zidane, how do you see this? I mean, some of these attacks have been particularly nasty and quite personal with these women reporters. And none of these questions were unreasonable questions. They were questions any journalist would ask the president. Why do you think he's gotten so upset?
Well, I'm not going to do what David just did and pretend to psychoanalyze the president, who I refer to as the president. He's not by his first name to me. I refer to the office with respect. No matter who is in that office, I would do the same for Presidents Biden and Obama. The president is not someone who I've extensively psychoanalyzed. Obviously, he has a very hostile relationship with the press, but there was an interesting anecdote that one reporter said. I believe it was Jake Tapper when there would be a back and forth between the president, at the time candidate Trump, and then a reporter, and he would kind of smile and wink afterwards. The president knows that for a large part of the populace, mainstream media represents a show, especially television. The president is a master at the cable news cycle. And what you've referred to, whether or not you agree or disagree with it, it's certainly effective in that it gets a news cycle, it owns a news cycle, and then people largely move on. I'm glad you're doing this. You're taking a deeper look at it than many American journalists do. But for a lot of the journalists, the reporters who work in the United States, even in the White House press corps, these are one-day stories and they move on. I think that that's a weakness of the press today that the president exploits, but it's a larger issue with the way the media covers politics in the United States.
But when you look at these personal attacks, I understand he has a hostile relationship for whatever reason. Is this warranted? Are his responses warranted? Do you agree with the White House press secretary's justification for his behavior?
He believes that they're warranted. He's taking his war against the press to a new level. He's lashing out at them. He, in those moments, believes that it's warranted. And I'll tell you what else it does. It strengthens his relationship with his base. And not to psychoanalyze him, it's been pretty clear throughout the 10 years that Donald Trump has been on the political stage that the relationship with his base is critical to both him and his success. And by fighting against the people who his base believe have let them down throughout the past few decades, whether it's the mainstream press, whether it's the Republican Party establishment, whether it's other nations and unfair trade deals, he increases the loyalty of those around him. His base eats this up.
Well, Mr. Johnston, just to bring you here, we're just having some audio issues with Alex's feed, and we'll try and come back to that. But the important point that Alex Zidane was making there was that this is something that he does to address his base, and he feels that it's justified. Except my question is that at the cost of calling women Miss Piggy, ugly, stupid, incapable, again, all for questions that were based on fact. None of these were biased questions that had a slant. They were just matter of fact questions that any reporter would ask.
Well, Donald, first of all, I agree with a lot of what Alex had to say, particularly about the performance of the White House press corps, which I've been highly critical of for years, way before Donald Trump. But I think Donald's behavior here is beneath the dignity of the office. And by the way, I call him Donald for the same reason I call Chuck Schumer Chuck and Nancy Pelosi Nancy. These are people who are subordinate to us. They are our employees who we have temporarily given power to act on our behalf, but they are not powers unto themselves. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind. In all of my writings and my teachings, I always refer to our Constitution, not the Constitution. And so when Donald lashes out like this, whether it's a man or a woman, they're most pronounced with women lately, he's really lowering the dignity of the office. He is behaving in a way that no other president has ever behaved, nor have most world leaders. I mean, you have to look far and wide, and you would find responses like that primarily from dictators, not from democratically elected leaders. And it is very important that Donald maintain his base, but let's keep clear, his base is a minority of Americans. And you're supposed to be president of the country, not your base.
Alex, Zidane, do you want to sort of respond to that? I'm sorry we lost you there in between, but Mr. Johnston saying that he is lowering the dignity of his own office by using this kind of language against reporters and women in particular. I mean, I've been a reporter for nearly 25 years, more than 25 years now. And, I know that when a president or a world leader talks like that to you, it is a way of also intimidating journalists from doing their job.
Is it?
Isn't it?
Is it? I would say this. I would say that I was a reporter in a previous life. I have not been a White House reporter, but I have had pretty intense exchanges with a governor whom I covered, and I was part of a state house press corps. I was not intimidated. So I can only speak for myself in that one respect, Nidhi, and I will only speak for myself. So it didn't intimidate me. It actually encouraged me to do my job even better. And when we're talking about that governor, Phil Murphy of New Jersey, he also gave me his tell. His tell was that when you make him angry and throw him off his talking points, he might actually give you the truth. Every person, every political figure is different. But I think that the way to handle any public figure that you're covering is going to depend on what reactions you get. So,
But is the onus on the journalist to handle Mr. Trump, or isn't the onus on Mr. Trump to stop using derogatory language against?
no, the onus is on the journalist to get the answers to their question.
How is
That's the onus.
How is it right for him to call somebody Miss Piggy or ugly or stupid? I mean, why? Why should he do that?
I didn't say he should do it. I'm talking to you right now, Nidhi, with politeness and with general good humor. So look at what I do. Don't necessarily look at how I comport myself with journalists. Just because Donald Trump does something doesn't mean I would do it. There's a key difference there. But I
I'm
can
not saying you
see
would.
the strategy.
So you're saying it's strategic. It's to appeal to his base.
I think that it is. I would not pretend to know what the president is thinking if in the moment, if it is something strategic. However, you can see when the president has a back and forth with the press, sometimes he genuinely enjoys it. I was surprised when you saw the president on Air Force One. You could see the corridors in Air Force One are a bit more narrow than you'd have in a building. So somebody opened the bathroom door into his back by accident. I thought he was going to be mad. He actually smiled about that. It's clear that that the president enjoys this back and forth sparring with the press because he keeps doing it. He has 1 or 2 press availabilities a day, some of them inside the Oval Office. That's more than any president before him. And I would also say that in all fairness to our previous presidents, in all fairness to the office, he's basically saying what Richard Nixon thought and occasionally did express himself. So I think that's the key distinction here with President Trump. He's saying out loud what probably the majority of our previous presidents have thought. And with Richard Nixon, there is historical evidence that he thought that way.
Well, you may not like the press, but these attacks are misogynistic. These attacks are derogatory. I mean, he attacked the female New York Times reporter who was a co-author of an article with a male journalist on his health last week. He chose to single her out, but didn't attack the male reporter. So is there a pattern here with the way his disdain for women is what I'm asking, Alex.
The Barbara Rez quote that David mentioned before, or Barbara Rez herself is an interesting figure. And I do enjoy her quote, the full quote, David, where allegedly the president, then a developer in New York, told her that he believed that men were better than women. But the second part of the quote is, a good woman is better than 10 men. And I think that says a lot about the president's philosophy about women and men, that there are some women who he deeply respects, like Barbara Rez, who had an incredible amount of responsibility to build up that development empire and did so extraordinarily well.
Mr. Johnston, what are the long-term implications, though, when a relationship? I think it's good if a relationship between an elected president and the media is adversarial, and so it's not supposed to be friendly. That's great. I mean, they're not supposed to necessarily like each other. But when he uses this kind of language, and the reason I said it can be intimidating is because I have read pieces from young women journalists in America who are worried that there will be young women reporters who will be afraid or think twice before asking a difficult question of him, worried that there would be, insults hurled at them, which would then become headlines, embarrass them or whatever. And that shouldn't be the case.
Well, I think if you're going to play in national journalism, you have to recognize that you're going to deal with people who are going to be insulting, difficult. Hillary Clinton tried very hard to get the New York Times to fire me over a 100% accurate story she did not want told. And in fact, later adopted the implicit tax advice that I had in that story. that's the nature of the game. And I don't think any of the White House reporters, male or female, are intimidated by Donald. I think the concern to the public should be Donald's disrespect for democratic institutions and democratic norms. I've been warning people now for 14 years, almost 15 years, that Donald's view of the presidency is he wants to be our dictator. And in fact, he has said, I have an Article 2 that says I can do anything I want, which, by the way, is not at all what Article 2 of the American Constitution says. It's not even close. But he's behaving as if that's the case. And one of the things dictators have to do is either bring the press to heel, discredit the press, or if you're Putin, Orban, dictator Kim, you just get rid of the press. You only have state news. And Donald has said many, many times, it should be against the law to write things about me that I don't approve of. That's pretty plainly dictatorial. So as long as he's president, we will have to live with this. My concern is that he shifted the dynamic and that there are other people who may be elected president in the future, assuming we get past this regime, this administration, who will adopt a similar attitude. This is an administration that, on the one hand, as Alex points out quite rightly, no president has been as accessible to reporters as Donald Trump, because Donald really loves the attention. On the other hand, his administration is unbelievably secretive. They are withholding documents. They're removing documents. They have threatened several people who've testified under oath to Congress that they were told that they had better not testify. And of course, we have a whole list of words that are forbidden. We have an administration that has withdrawn research grants for science because the word diversity appears somewhere, even though the diversity in that case may have nothing to do with the concepts of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but have to do with some scientific issue about materials or cellular organisms. So the hostility here that you're seeing most presented in Donald's exchanges with women reporters who ask, as they should, reasonable and, if necessary, aggressive questions, is part of a larger hostility to everything must be subordinate to me. And, you know, in 2011, when I said that Donald believes he's special and that he should run the country and really is the only person who should be in charge of running the whole world, I was mocked for that. Well, guess what? Donald, earlier this year in an interview with the Atlantic magazine, said, I run the country and the whole world. And so I don't think there's any ability to dispute his view that he has been given these powers to do anything he wants. And
I'm going to take
he's behaving that way.
points. Alex Zidane, to take that back to you, is this part of a dictatorial streak? And to me, the question also is, what about accountability of the president's office? If he's asked questions on the Epstein files or the Venezuela boat or the Saudi crown prince being at the White House, are these not questions that the American people are owed an answer to?
Well, clearly, the journalists who are working, whether they're in the White House press corps or outside, there are other ways to get information and answers without directly questioning the president of the United States. So I don't know what the relationship is like with the various press secretaries in the different departments, but there is a give and take between the press and any administration. Lots of administrations invoke executive privilege. Lots of administrations clash with Congress. So I think that there should be accountability and transparency, but it's not that the only way to do that is to ask questions of the president of the United States during a televised press briefing. So, and we haven't even talked about the fact that in the first Trump term, there were reporters, mainly men, mostly like Jim Acosta, who made cottage industries out of sparring with President Trump and turned it into very lucrative book deals and show deals. And that in and of itself, taking advantage of the spotlight that's around the president of the United States, I believe is degrading and demeaning to the proper practice of journalism.
But if journalists in the US can't ask the president direct questions and have to route it through a press secretary, then what's the point? I mean, that's what the media's job is. And, you know, presidents...
Questions. You're just not happy with the answer.
No, I mean, the answer can't be that you're Miss Piggy. and you're incapable.
Yes, it can be. It can be.
You
And
know
then the
what?
voters decide based on that.
One of the most defined. Well, no, it shouldn't be, and then you're
Well,
justifying.
then you
language.
are saying that you would like to censor the president of the United States. You would like to say, Mr. President, here you go. These
So
are
he
things you
can
can't say. There you go.
he can hurl abuses at women reporters unjustified, make personal attacks, and only at women journalists because that's his freedom of speech.
He has hurled accusations and names at men as well. That was mostly in the first term, but he continues to do that. You know, when you do an interview, right, and someone doesn't answer your question, sometimes you don't even need to highlight it. It speaks for itself. People can form their attitudes on the President of the United States and all public figures by the way they comport themselves when they're in public, including with journalists. That is absolutely valid territory. And if the president gets himself into political trouble, gets himself into reputational trouble with these insults, then that is absolutely something that people can use against him.
Well, Mr. Johnston, last 30 seconds to you. How would you sort of sum up that? I just wanted to say one small thing. I was a child growing up in New York when I saw Sam Donaldson of ABC News question the president and stop him and say, he asked him a question and the president didn't want to answer, and he said, "Hold on, Mr. President," and he wrote an entire book on that. And that stayed etched in my mind, that isn't that fantastic that a reporter can talk to the president of the United States like this and press for an answer. uh, Mr. Johnston, and I said that in response to what Alex was saying about whether you should question the president directly. Unfortunately, I'm currently in a country where we can't question our prime minister on so many things directly, and that's a separate program. But Mr. Johnston.
Well, there's been a steady movement in White Houses, and I've been calling White Houses back to Nixon, of not answering questions they don't want to answer, being uncooperative. Barack Obama was especially bad about this, and I called him out about it 10 days after he took office for exactly this, I don't like the question, we're not going to answer it. And they would literally hang up on you at the Obama White House if they didn't like the question. So Trump is part of it needs to be seen in the context of this deteriorating position. But I think the more important issue here is that the president of the United States should behave with dignity and respect for the office that he or she holds. Donald Trump is not behaving that way. He is behaving as if he is entitled, that he is all powerful, and he can do any damn thing that he chooses. And the result is to degrade the level of debate. And after all, the whole idea of the American Constitution, of our Constitution, is that we will decide our fate, not some monarch somewhere, not some all-powerful dictator. And that requires rational and reasoned debate. Emotional responses like Trump is giving, they are beneath the dignity of our constitutional system. And we should properly criticize Trump for doing exactly that.
Well, I'm happy to say that at least I think that with the two of you, we've had a very sort of reasonable and civil debate, and that's how I wish it would be. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us on that interesting story and the way it's developing. Alex Zidane, David Johnston, thank you again.
Thank you, Nidhi.
And that's it on the show this week. We'll be back with much more next week, including on the India-US trade deal, where talks are currently underway. The President and the Prime Minister of India have spoken. Will there finally be a breakthrough? Join us next week. Goodbye.